So hi, I'm Sam Matty, and Mr. Tobias Mike Jensen has kindly invited me to chat with him today. I'm 24. I'm from the United States of America, which is quite a stressful place to be from just at the moment. But uh, I write the Weekly Anthropocene, a news about the amazing efforts taking place around the world to help build a better future for humanity and its biosphere. I've also recently started writing Your Daily Dose of Climate Hope for the Climate Action Now U.S. Environmental Organization, which adapts some similar content to create like actionable stuff that you can take with the Climate Action Now app to contact state and federal and local leaders. So one thing I really try to write about is the emerging suite of solutions that are really kind of win-wins for humanity and the environment. Renewable energy is a great one. Not only does it reduce carbon dioxide emissions and help prevent catastrophic global warming and reduce uh, small local level air pollutants like black carbon and PM 2.5 to prevent respiratory diseases. Not only does it do all of that, but there's an increasing wave of research and evidence showing that a lot of wildlife and agriculture can actually coexist really well with solar panels. Desert plants in China and America, researchers have found that more desert plants grow under solar panels that have been placed in the desert than in just regular non-solar panel desert because it provides some shade and condenses water and stuff. So, and then there's just tons and tons of other amazing work being done in tons of other fields, like malaria vaccines, an amazing strike against one of humanity's most ancient and deadly enemies. That's one of the biggest stories in the world right now, and it barely gets covered. There's some amazing examples of human wildlife coexistence in cities. There's hundreds of whales in New York Harbor these days, now that the Clean Water Act has cleaned up the water and fishing limits have allowed the menhaden population to surge back. There's a lot of really interesting, positive win-win stories happening around the world that don't get covered a lot, not really due to anyone's fault, just due to sort of the structural, psychological nature of humans that we click on scaly, attention-grabbing things and not sort of slow, positive things that happen over years. And that's part of what I try to write about and share.
Awesome. We'll talk a lot more about that later. To begin with, you live a really interesting lifestyle as a digital nomad. Could you tell our audience a bit about what led you into this lifestyle?
Well, it kind of just happened a bit by accident. Well, I was homeschooled, and so I was really comfortable for a long time with doing work sort of self-directed, self-monitored on a computer. Um, my parents homeschooled me, and just gave me a lot of freedom to learn at my own pace. That led me to starting college pretty early when I was like 15 and 16 and graduating with a bachelor's when I was 18. Um, and and a lot of my college courses were online. So I guess I just was sort of prepared for it. In that I was used to sort of working just with me and my computer and not having like someone telling me what to do or telling me like now you start, now you stop, this is what you do today, just needing to generate your own like motivation and focus and time management. So I guess I was used to that. And then in 2019, after I graduated from college at the University of Southern Maine, with a bachelor's in environmental science, I worked for 3 months in Madagascar with the Madagascar Biodiversity Partnership. I've written a lot about that. That's on my Substack and my old blog. That was a really formative experience. And I wanted to travel a lot more because I just found it fascinating. But then right after I got home, the COVID pandemic hit. So I was kind of unable to travel like everyone else for like a year and a half, sort of 2020 and half of 2021. And so after that, I really, really wanted to travel. And the way the housing market was shaking up, it was actually cheaper to sort of travel and live in sort of fairly cheap Airbnbs than it was to rent an apartment in America at the time. Um, so I've been lucky enough to go to a bunch of cool places over the past couple of years. Um, I've been able to walk to write from the Netherlands, India, Albania, and right now I'm in Mexico actually. So I've also spent a big chunk of time in the US, of course, but I've been traveling sort of to I guess, an unusual degree. And I've been fortunate enough that my current job, I have a range of different stuff I work on. I do my newsletter for Climate Action Now. I do some GIS and technical writing consulting. All of that can be done from my laptop. So my whole business fits in my laptop, so I can do that from anywhere. And I'm really enjoying it. I just have to give a complete mea culpa for the carbon emissions of flying so much. I have no excuse for that. I'm vegetarian. I don't have a car. I have a low carbon footprint in many respects, but That's probably all completely canceled out by the fact that I take a bunch of plane flights per year. So that is my completely my own fault. But I'm really hopeful that in the next few years to decades, battery technology advances far enough that we can get battery powered planes. And in the meantime, the sustainable aviation fuels, like the Vulcanol project in Iceland and the UK, there's a bunch of interesting work going on. But yeah, I guess I'm just sort of figuring this out as I go along. I don't have like a 10-step plan to become a digital nomad or something, but I've been fortunate enough to have some cool experiences. You can read a lot about some of the places I've been on my Substack, sammatty.substack.com, and don't really have a clever conclusion for this, but yes, I've been fortunate enough to travel and work a lot.
Hmm? How do you decide which places you go to?
Well, I write this weekly newsletter about cool stuff happening in the world. And often when I notice a bunch of really cool stories coming from one country or one region, I'm like, wow, if I went there, I could go see like these five things that I read about and are really interesting. Like in Mexico, just recently, in late January, I was hanging out with this scientist guy who I interviewed back in November, Dr. Cuauhtemoc Sainz Romero, who had this really interesting project where he's trying to make sure the monarch butterfly, Danaus plexippus, will have a long-term future in hibernating in Mexico, even during the winters, even as the temperatures rise past what they consider comfortable. And he's doing that by planting their favorite hibernation tree, Abaes religiosa, the sacred Oyama fir, higher up on the mountaintops than where it lives normally, so that as the temperatures rise, there'll still be those forest groves that the monarchs can come to and hibernate in. So I'd written about his work just as a news item, and then I interviewed him. And then when I ended up in Mexico, I got to go meet him in person and see his field site. I haven't written the article about that yet, but it'll be upcoming soon. And and so that kind of thing, I see like a bunch of interesting stuff happening, and I'm like, I could go there. And also, there's an interesting, I think Tim Ferriss or someone coined the term geo arbitrage. Like, if you're getting paid in American money, so to speak, and you're spending a chunk of the time in different countries, there's often a really substantial sort of you can get like food and lodging often just due to the lower cost of labor and stuff for at a higher quality for a much lower price than you could get in the US. So that helps too. Like I doubt I could afford to spend a lot of time traveling in like Switzerland or Singapore or a really sort of high cost of living country like that. But in Mexico, it works.
Hmm. You told me something that I was thinking a bit about before we started recording here, that you didn't really use social media before you were 18, around that age. And my impression is, you can tell me if I'm wrong, but I think that you have a very disciplined relationship with social media. And I think that's kind of interesting for someone who lives as a digital nomad. Could you tell me a bit about your like views on social media use and how you use it personally?
I try. It's tough, man. It's complex. Like you said, my parents sort of, in my opinion, very, very wisely, sort of kept my brother and I off social media when we were kids, and they were off social media too. And I guess technically, in a way, Substack is social media in that it's an app and an email newsletter that that has that online sort of many-to-one communication vibe or one-to-many communication vibe. So in theory, I use social media a lot because I write a Substack newsletter, but I don't use Facebook or Twitter or X or whatever it is nowadays, or Blue Sky or Instagram or Snapchat or TikTok, or I'm sure there's tons of others. But basically, I just use Substack and just sort of like web news browsing, like reading Associated Press and Manga Bay and a bunch of other stuff. So I guess I use WhatsApp, but that's just to keep in touch with my family and stuff. That's not really a social media thing. That's my communication platform. Um, so social media, man, it can do great and terrible things. It is crazy. Oh yeah, one other thing I guess I use that could be described as social media is iNaturalist, this really great citizen science app about taking pictures of and identifying wildlife around the world. I really enjoy that. That's a great way to contribute to science and learn more about the ecosystems you're in. But like but By the way, sorry if my voice is sounding really weird. Like I said, I'm getting over a cold, so it's all probably all raspy and stuff.
No
Um,
problem.
but uh, But yeah, man, social media, it can do great things, it can do terrible things. It can just totally warp your perception of reality. You can fine-tune your algorithm to make you believe that the world is absolutely collapsing in flames and everyone will kill you if you step outside. You make it believe that everyone is sharing the exact same niche political or religious belief you have, and everyone who doesn't believe that is crazy. It can just sort of hijack human brains sociability and just make you believe almost anything. It's really powerful, really dangerous, can also do really good things and mobilize people and unite people to do amazing things. I guess one my big take on social media is new communication technologies are often really, really disruptive. Like the printing press in Europe, when Gutenberg invented it in the late 1400s, Europe was basically torn by religious war for the next 200 years because suddenly people could print their own ideas about Christianity, and that allowed Protestantism to grow really fast where previous heresies couldn't, and suddenly people could spread ideas really fast, and there wasn't a centralized sort of administration of knowledge, and and it caused the 40 Years' War, which killed a huge chunk of the population of Germany before you got like the Westphalian consensus and a degree of stability. And that was awful, but the printing press was still worth it. Like we still need the printing press. Like spreading knowledge allowed humans to get the industrial revolution and escape from extreme poverty and go to the moon and do all sorts of amazing stuff. So new communication technologies are really, really disruptive. And it's both caused a lot of disruption, social media. But if you told someone 100 years ago that most people in the world now have a little rectangle in their pocket that can show like any information anywhere in the world at any time, I think they'd be amazed that we still have a functioning society at all. So we are both sort of experiencing a lot of disruption, and I think we're sort of metabolizing this. We're figuring this out. Like people going out with social media or developing as opposed to experiencing it for the first time as adults. People growing up with social media are developing, I think, healthier norms around it. I have no evidence for that, but that's just my sort of gut feeling based on talking to people my age. Um, and it is tough. It is addictive. Like sometimes I wonder if, pictures of people with smartphones in the streets or kids with smartphones will be looked at in the future in the same way as like we look at pictures of people with cigarettes all the time. Like it's like whoa, you're just giving those out and giving those to kids and taking them all around. Like it's amazing technology, and we're not going to give it up. Maybe it'll become just part of the basic human technology pack, but maybe we're just evolving and figuring out the limits and the social norms that allow us to use this responsibly. And I personally have found that it's really helpful, not even for social media, just for news. I've I use a bunch of ad blockers so that I block the internet like before like 9 in the morning and after like 7 at night, so that I'm not being affected by news when I'm like waking up or going to sleep, and I'm most sort of psychologically vulnerable to it, and that's really helped me. And like so, when I'm reading about some horrible thing in the news, I'm reading it when I'm like reasonably awake and focused and not going to be crushed by it. So there's a whole bunch of stuff people can do to find balance around that. It's complex.
It is really complex,
Yeah. I don't know if
especially
that's
especially when it comes to very complex problems like climate change and biodiversity. I feel like it's very problematic that it's so hard to really get a sense of what is going on, especially when it comes to the environment and when it comes to climate, which are the fields that you're engaged in. Um, Obtaining truthful information about these topics is extremely difficult. And people get their information a lot from social media, just scrolling, swiping, scrolling. Um, Knowing what's right and what's wrong in that kind of system is extremely difficult. So let's focus for a minute on climate change and the environment. How do you stay positive about these topics? Because I know you have a very positive spirit. In general, you're not writing from a point of negativity and pessimism, but from a point of hope and optimism. So, how do you stay optimistic about our efforts against climate change?
well, it's interesting because the fundamental thing is like humans want to condense stuff into simple narratives, right? Things are going good, things are going bad, things are getting worse, things are getting better, everything's good, everything's bad. Like the world is just immense. 8 billion people, billions upon billions of wild animals, really complex worldwide systems. Lots of very bad and very good things are happening simultaneously. And that is and that is hard to keep in mind. And they don't offset and cancel out to form some net sum of slightly good or slightly bad. There's both very, very good and very, very bad happening at the same time. And that's hard for people to keep in mind. That's hard for everyone to keep in mind. And I guess what I'm trying to do when I write about such positive stuff is just highlight some of the good, which is sort of inherently disadvantaged and sort of attention grabbing, just to try to like just to try to give people the sense that like, the news is the average news, the front page of the New York Times or whatever, is a collection of the worst things happening in the world on any given day, right? But like the best things happening in the world tend to not make the front page because they happen slowly and non-dramatically, and they don't have like a big dramatic explosion for like the headline picture. Like, a building exploding or falling down is really dramatic and attention grabbing. A building getting built is probably never makes the front page because it happens slowly over time. And there's been just immense increases in human quality of life. Half as many kids in the world. There are half as many dead human children under the age of 5 in the world today as there are in 1990 each year. About 12 million kids under the age of 5 died each year in 1990, and now only about like 6 million do. And that's due to a whole bunch of things like better medical care, just basic sanitation sweating in places like India, better crops, meaning less malnutrition. But like the absolute number, not just the percentage of dead children in the world being cut in half is a really big deal. But that never really made it onto the front page anywhere because it happened really slowly. And what it looked like was a bunch of people giving kids vitamins in poor villages in India. It didn't look really dramatic. Um, so that's just one example of like if you look at some of the statistics and numbers, our world in data is a really great site for this. It's an Oxford data science project. It's really spectacular. If you look at the actual numbers of what's happening in the world, not like the dramatic viral video or anecdote or something, you often get a much better sense of how things are, and things often look not nearly as bad as you think. And also, like I had a great interview with Jason Poygan. He's a novelist, but he writes a lot about this kind of thing. And he said, recently I was with my friends around a table full of food, and they were looking at news on their recently invented pocket supercomputers, and they were telling each other that this state of affairs was literally an apocalypse. And like, and he's like, no, it's not. If you
Mm.
look around what's actually happening in your world, you are among the richest and most well-fed humans to have ever lived. Um, what we've actually had in the last 200 years is a reverse apocalypse, a sudden massive increase in quality of life. And and the thing is, none of what I'm just saying takes away from the fact that horrible things can happen. Horrible degradations in civil society and democratic governments in the United States, atrocious wars, disease, global pandemics, the ongoing drumbeat of emissions in the atmosphere and climate change leading to unprecedented changes in our biosphere. All of that's happening too. But I guess part of the reason I write what I write is people know that that does make the news. But what people don't know, for example, is that like renewable energy is advancing ridiculously faster than almost anyone could have possibly believed. 10 years ago in 2015, when the Paris Agreement was signed, um, the world's best experts expected we'd hit a certain amount of installed solar power by 2050. And we hit that number in 2023. We are like what compared to what we thought in 2015, we're like 27 years ahead of schedule on building out solar power because the technology's gotten better and there's been economies of scale and supportive policy and a bunch of stuff. Renewable energy accounted for over 90% of new electricity generating capacity built in the United States in 2024. Like solar power was 60%, batteries another like 20 something percent, wind like another 10, 15%. Like worldwide, over 80% of all new electricity generating capacity being built is renewable. It's solar power is the cheapest electricity in history. And with batteries, that essentially solves the intermittency problem. And we can keep the lights on during the night with batteries saving the energy generated during the day. Like the problems are very bad and get worse in a lot of ways. But solutions can also accelerate faster than you think. And you can also have really counterintuitive things where the problem gets worse and yet the sort of tragic effect of the problem gets better. Like the one classic example is extreme weather. Storms have gotten worse over the last like 50 years. There's more thermal energy in the atmosphere, hotter oceans, bigger storms. But fewer people are dying from storms than ever before, in large part because we have satellite weather systems and people have smartphones so you can get alerts. Like in the 1970s, a cyclone hit Bangladesh, back then it was East Pakistan, and killed like 300,000 people. And that was a category 4 cyclone hitting Bangladesh. And in like 2020 or 2019 or 2018-ish, another cyclone hit almost the exact same area of Bangladesh. And it was a category 5 cyclone, a big old storm. And it killed like less than 1,000 people, like a factor of 100,000 fewer casualties for a big old storm in the same area. And that was mostly because Bangladesh has developed a really good storm early warning system. And even if you have one person with a flip phone per village and they get an alert, that's enough to get the whole village to move to higher ground or to a storm shelter. And that means like you don't have tons of people out in the field that are just going to get drowned and washed away like back in the 70s. So that's the kind of thing. Like even as the world gets worse in some respects, it can get better in other respects, even in the exact same category.
To use a specific example, for instance, in the US, where Donald Trump is saying drill, baby, drill, and doesn't really believe in the green transitioning, perhaps there are some people in the audience who are a bit angry or concerned about these policies in the US. How would you respond to these people?
Yeah, well, the current US administration is just massively disappointing and sad. I personally donated and campaigned for Kamala Harris, obviously. Been writing stuff about the importance of environmental policy in the US for years and years. I don't understand how so many of my fellow countrymen voted for a adjudicated rapist, convicted felon, just an incarnation of evil, basically. I don't understand it at all. I just
Thanks
can't
for
get my
saying that clearly. It's really nice.
yeah. He's an evil, 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 evil man. And he won the popular vote this time, which I just don't understand. And I gotta believe, just for the sake of belief, just because most people are not as evil as him, right? Most people do not try to screw over and not pay their business partners. Most people do not try to assault people near them. The world would be a bloody hellscape if everyone had the morals of Donald Trump, but it's not. So I guess I just gotta believe that most most people who voted for him were voting for a shock jock comedian or some imaginary image of him attacking imaginary threats about that they hold on Fox News or something that's divorced from the reality. I I don't know, man. If I knew why this happened, I would be doing something different to try to make sure it
Hmm.
didn't happen. I don't know. But I guess what I can say is a classic Stephen Colbert line from back in the 2000s. Reality has a well-known liberal bias. And and like solar power will continue to be cheaper than fossil fuels no matter what the president says. Like the world will continue to warm on the bad side no matter what the president says. Um, it will continue to be an uphill struggle to try to build new fossil fuel capacity. Like the big Stargate AI project in Texas that Trump loves and talked a lot about. They just recently said, hey, we'd actually like to build solar panels to power these data centers because that's the cheapest source. Like things have changed so much in the past 10 years. Renewable energy doesn't actually need political support anymore to survive, although it needs it to go as fast as possible, which is really important because every fraction of a degree of warming matters, and we really need to make this happen as fast as possible. But at this point, just the sheer economic and technological logic is going to keep pushing renewable energy forward just because it's the cheapest and best there is now. And what's really mostly happening is that the question is really not whether the world's moving towards renewable energy. The question is the current American government going to completely squander and deindustrialize the nascent American renewable energy industries that have been building up under Biden and let China take even more of a lead in these new technologies in the future? So the world's definitely moving to renewable energy, kind of unstoppably at this point, just due to the economics of it. But the question is how much individual national leaders can screw up their own country's chance to have a piece of that pie. So we shall see.
Do you think the revolution, so to speak, in climate tech is similar to the revolution, so to speak, in AI?
It's interesting. Yeah, I think there's a lot of parallels. I think that it's interesting that AI sort of grabs the attention so much more, and it really does. Clearly, it's got that sort of more magic science fiction feel when you talk to ChatGPT or DeepSeek or anything, and you get a response. But I think there's really a case that the clean energy revolution is a bigger deal than AI. even though AI is a very, very big deal, because solar power is just beginning to be exploited properly. We've got tons of new solar panel designs, new materials like perovskite. We're just at the beginning of this. And what we are rapidly building is essentially a flat pack surface that you can ship by the truckload that has no emissions, no moving parts, no fuel costs, that you can just put down on any flat surface or with new designs on any surface at all, including coal or like fabric or anything, and get free energy. And that is huge. If we keep the current rate of solar progress running for a couple more decades, we will have essentially solved all our energy related problems. Like we will have enough energy to do huge air filters to scrub viruses out of city centers or giant desalination projects to bring water to deserts or probably a whole bunch of stuff we haven't even thought of yet. And it is just like, it's the quietest revolution. The Economist did a great article about this called Sun Machines, because it is literally a noiseless, like smokeless, flat thing, a solar panel that is just sitting on a roof or a field near you. It is the most unobtrusive world-changing technology possible. It does not do dramatic things that grab attention, but it is so huge and it is changing everything. And I think AI, there's been a lot of concern over AI's energy use, and I think that is certainly legitimate. And in some areas with a lot of data centers like Northern Virginia, that might push up prices and cause local problems. But fundamentally, it does seem like there's a natural synchronicity between us sorts of intelligence or quasi-intelligence or LLM analysis or whatever you want to call it that runs on energy and rapid increase in the amount of energy humans can cleanly and safely access. And I wrote an article recently for AI Supremacy, Michael Spencer, that's how we met, that just talked about some of the synchronicities there. Like like AI is a big deal, but in the energy sector, it's still fairly small. The International Energy Agency expects that AI data centers will account for only like 3% of energy demand growth through 2030. And we're already seeing like much lower energy use, more efficient AI models. There's a natural drive towards efficiency just for the economics, like China's DeepSeek and the tiny ML model that's doing a lot of great stuff in the global south that Science Magazine talked about. Um, there's a whole bunch of really good, much more efficient AI models going. There's a whole bunch of AI projects powered by clean energy. AI can even incentivize the development of new clean energy, like the enhanced geothermal slide at Fulvo, providing power to Google data centers in Utah. And also AI can directly help design new battery electrodes and find new sources of minerals and help produce energy. So AI, I suspect, is going to be extremely disruptive. Already is in some ways, but almost like even if like I don't know, interactive chatbot games that lead people to complete solipsistic worlds where they never interact with another human, or like the big story and the really scary thing that upset a lot of people, even like the side benefit of some similar technology of LLMs being used to develop really advanced new drugs or battery electrodes could bring really huge positive benefits for the world that you don't think about. Like I think it's gonna be really messy and turbulent, but I do hope that the advance to science, the advancement in biomedical and energy technologies and other technologies that we can accelerate humans' abilities to do stuff in the world thanks with AI assistance. I do hope that that's going to be on net a positive,
And
and I
for
do think it sort
people
of synchronizes naturally with the clean energy revolution.
And for people who are watching this, perhaps there's some people out there who are a bit, pessimistic about the world and spend a bit too much time on social media, reading about bad news and things that are going on in the world. What advice would you give to these people?
Get off your phone. Touch grass, as the internet saying goes. Like walk outside and note that the buildings are not on fire. That if you're on your phone and you're reading news, it's charged by electricity, and that electricity came from somewhere. And there's maybe solar panels on your roof or power lines going by, and they're working. And tons of people, including the kind of people who have opinions you find really horrible, are doing their jobs and making these systems around you work. If you're reading news on your phone, you're almost certainly the one of the richest people in the history of your family with access to technologies that your ancestors would have considered magical or godlike. And I guess the sort of selfish thing to say would be check out my newsletter. I write about lots of positive stuff, but
It's cool. Self-promotion is
but
okay here.
but also just keep in mind that like what you see on your phone is algorithmically selected to be the most upsetting stuff in the world for you personally. Like that way madness lies. Like you are literally getting the sifted things from 8 billion people that are optimized to upset you personally the most possible so that you click on them and are horrified and click on more. Like that is not a balanced picture of the world. That is not an accurate picture of the world.
And what about people who are concerned about their environmental imprints? You told me earlier that you perhaps felt a bit bad because you were flying a lot. Um, do you do anything, or do you recommend any actions to people that people can take, which is like beneficial for the environment and for the future health of the earth?
Yeah, I mean, I'm personally vegetarian. I think that's important. That's kind of a personal choice, but that's one major emission source I try to avoid. Um, I try to walk and use public transport wherever possible. In India last year, I actually just took just one plane there and one plane back and went all around the subcontinent by train and bus. That was a lot of fun. Um, but I guess I guess it is not really fair to ask people to try to solve a civilizational problem by changing their personal habits. Like it is just not scalable. Most people are not going to become like penitent monks trying to minimize their environmental footprint. You need systemic level changes, society level changes supported by governments and economics and civil society that will provide people a high standard of living with low environmental impact. Stuff like electricity from solar panels instead of burning coal, or protein from Beyond Burger instead of beef. And so most of the actions I recommend these days are systemic actions. Like I just like on the Climate Action Now app, and the Your Daily Dose of Climate Hope Substack, my other Substack, there's a whole bunch of the daily actions people can take, asking like the state legislators to allow friendly permitting structures for new types of solar technology, or asking Congress to include new agricultural innovations in the next farm bill, stuff like that. Like a bunch of things that will just help the entire society, the big ship turn a little bit towards a low impact method. So I think there's a lot of great personal benefits to living a low environmentally impact lifestyle, just in terms of health and well-being and walking and biking instead of driving and eating healthier food and stuff. And that's great. Um, I guess I just think that and I know this because I've felt like this a lot. It is extremely difficult to feel that your personal life is responsible for world scale problems. And I feel like people can let go of that a little bit. Like people can try to think of this as a bigger civilizational scale thing.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's a great
Yeah.
point. We can't all, walk around and feel bad about, things we ultimately can't control. It's not benefiting anyone, right?
Yeah,
And
exactly.
um, and that also ties well into, our discussion earlier about social media and how that impacts people, because people are exposed to all these kind of news all the time that they can't really do anything about. And I'm not sure that our brains are like evolutionarily able to handle it. It kind of goes against our biology to have to take in so much information all the time. I think that's like a very interesting problem we have
Yeah.
nowadays.
Yeah, it is. It's an interesting time. It's an interesting time. We are all trying to figure out in real time at the same time how to live in an unprecedented world.
Mm, that's the perfect way to say it. Talking about AI's environmental footprint, how do you use AI, or do you use it at all?
One thing I like, I don't really use AI for text generation much because I really like writing and all my newsletter content is authentically human written. I do my own writing, but I have absolutely no artistic skill whatsoever. So I do sometimes use like DALL-E and other AI image generators to create AI images to enhance the story or something like that. So that's something I found really useful. Um, I I guess I just don't really use the chatbots a lot, even though they're the sort of most famous manifestation of AI, just because I feel like the hallucination problem is really serious. And there's tons of famous examples of Google AI summaries or ChatGPT or whatever just saying misleading things. And even I've even noticed that just on the few occasions I have used it, and it can become just and it is sort of inherent to the nature of the technology at the moment. So that is an issue. So I guess I primarily would say I use primarily the image generation AIs, and I sort of play with the other AIs, but don't rely on them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Some people say that in the future we'll have super intelligence that can solve problems like climate change. What is your opinion on that? Do you think that AI will become super intelligent and help with these very, very complex issues?
See, I think that these are sort of really fuzzily defined terms. In a way, AI is already super intelligent and is already helping with super complex issues in the sense that it can like analyze huge data sets that would take humans 10 decades and decades to look at within seconds. Like I've noticed that whenever like technology or computer technology starts actually doing something, we say, oh, that's not super intelligence. The next thing that it can't do is super intelligence. Like computers, just basic free AI computers have been able to do math at a super intelligent level way faster and more complex than humans for like decades now. And that is kind of super intelligence in a way, but we don't think of it that way. And I guess what I'm saying is these definitions are kind of fuzzy. And I suspect that if you talk to someone from 30 years ago and showed them ChatGPT, they'd be like, my God, you have super intelligent AI already. Look, it can talk, it knows all this stuff. Um, so I suspect that we might have something that you and I today would consider super intelligent AI in 20 years, but you and I in 20 years will not consider it super intelligent AI, and we'll just consider it robo scientist or like robo analyst or whatever that is helping like advise governments on the best thing to do or whatever this is. So not sure that's an answer, but I think that anything that AI can actually achieve will rapidly be defined as not super intelligent and just a normal computer thing. And
Hmm.
but I think it will be helpful in many respects and also probably waste a whole lot of time and mess with a whole lot of people's lives and have a lot of negative effects. But but I suspect it will help develop fascinating new things as well.
And here, towards the end, what are your plans for the future in terms of what you're working on in this area of environmental consultancy, and what else you have going for you? What is your plans at the moment?
Well, I'm going to
For,
be in Mexico through May. I want to travel a little bit more around the country and the region and see some of the fascinating stuff. I want to keep writing. I want to just basically keep doing what I'm doing, keep iterating on writing and interviewing interesting people and trying to work with Climate Action Now on their Substack, Your Daily Dose of Climate Hope, to influence policy in positive, underreported directions where I can.
Awesome. Great. Yeah, I hope you continue to do the work that you do. It was really awesome talking with you. You came with some really good insights today.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Pleasure talking with you. Feel free to put my Substack links in the description for this and send me the link to the podcast episode whenever it's out.
Definitely will do. Thanks for the
Thank
time. Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to Futuristic Lawyer Podcast.